Jennifer and Sherry Lynn, I'm going to respond to you both using another video. That seems to be the way we want to do it this week. First of all, thank you, Jennifer, for your response. Some of the words and phrases that struck me from the video that I watched about having difficult conversations that you posted from Reynolds was that it's actually an opportunity. And one other thing is that when it's out there, and by out there I mean the tough issues, then it can't be ignored in the sense that no one can say that they don't know. Reynolds knows why she has difficult conversations. She says at the end of the video, "It's because I want the world to be a better place." Shields 2018 also wants the world to be a better place by creating a more equitable society through education. Reynolds suggests the importance of having the relationship established. She explains that the difficult conversations must take place between people who are invested in the relationship. I really love your perspective on this, Jennifer. I had been thinking more about having tough conversations between people in administration, and you really ran with a different angle looking at the teacher-student relationship, and I learned a lot about from that that I can apply to even conversations between different administration people as well. The best way to communicate, we know, is through having an established relationship, and that relationship becomes even more important when the dialogue may be difficult for the other person to hear or difficult for the person delivering it as well. Okay, so Sherry Lynn, you pose a question, and the reason I'm sending this video to both yourself and Jennifer is that you both responded, and I thought Jennifer might want to join us on this too. So your question was, how have ethics assisted or hindered you as you engaged in difficult decisions? And I immediately thought about my time as a boarding mistress. I've actually worked in 5 different boarding schools in 3 different countries, with most of them being in the UK. The reason there's a picture of a houseboat is we had a very unique case in one of our boarding schools where social workers had placed a child with us whose mother had actually passed away and whose father had been taking her with him on his trips around the world. So his job was actually to deliver wine between different ports, and she was taken with him and was not actually receiving education. So eventually the authorities caught up with them, and it was deemed best that she be placed in our care in the boarding school. And she absolutely loved it there. And she was actually, what we did was we had 100 girls in our boarding department. So amongst us staff, we took 4 or 5 of them each that we would make sure were doing well. When there's 100 girls, it's very easy for people to be forgotten, and so that's why we split them up. But this was a very tricky case because it became apparent that she had actually been cutting herself, and I knew I was going to have some difficult conversations with home as well as with other staff members. I also knew that my position was as senior boarding mistress, and that I wouldn't be able to share all the information that I had. I wouldn't be able to share that actually she'd been placed with us because of social workers, and but I knew I had to advocate for her. A lot of staff were very keen to just say, we know what the rules are. The rules are that we cannot place any other child in danger, and if she is cutting herself, then others might learn from her. But I also knew that being sent home in this case would mean a life on a boat without education. And so for me, that was actually a very tough time for me ethically. On one hand, I had the child's care as my highest priority. I also knew that other people wouldn't be able to understand the decisions that I was making and why I was trying to ask that we just care for this child in a different way and either place her with a family whose children already went to the school, and so that she could continue her education there and not have another change, or that we would find her a single room. Our children actually were 8 to a room if they were under 14. So I took very seriously the other staff's concerns about her obviously being an influence on others. So that was one time that my ethics assisted in really helping to find a solution that was actually going to be best for the child, and not just following what policy would say for boarding schools. Okay, just going to close this while I move on to the next picture. A much less serious case was when, as senior boarding mistress, I discovered that one of my junior boarding mistresses was actually making phone calls all the way to New Zealand and racking up some huge charges. This was a hard one because obviously our students have to pay for this privilege, and she was just abusing this and feeling like it was her right. So instead of make a huge big issue, we put a sign-up sheet beside it, and you had to write what number you had been ringing and what the purpose was for this. We felt we were able to do this because it was an office phone as well, and that prevented those phone calls from being had. I understand that in schools, you know, there's equipment there that you wouldn't normally maybe have at home. For example, there might be a photocopier, and the same with a boarding school, and that becomes the home of the children and of the staff that are living there and looking after the kids. And so there's temptations to use stuff that belongs to the school that actually, you know, if you're not paying for it, somebody else is paying for it, and so that can cause an ethical dilemma. In this case, I could have made a big deal about it. I could have called her into my office, probably causing her quite a bit of embarrassment, when actually we just put a simple procedure in place that actually helped with other issues, and it meant that she stopped using the phone when she shouldn't have. And we brought up at a boarding meeting, not immediately, so it wouldn't be linked to that particular case, but at another boarding meeting, about just being careful about using resources that belong to the school and checking with us if anybody wasn't sure. Because there were many privileges of staying in the boarding school, and sometimes the staff members would then abuse that and take it a little bit further. Okay, so my final situation, and I know in the last one actually we're talking about difficult conversations, and I just gave an example of where I didn't have a difficult conversation and kind of sorted out the situation without doing that, which would in the past have been more of my nature. With this last picture, it is meant to show an expensive gift. So we had a Chinese student staying in our boarding school, and she was being very badly bullied. And after talking to her parents, I said that I could take her home for the odd weekend as relief. Any weekend that I wasn't working, she would be able to come home with me and just have a bit of respite from the other children who were bullying her badly. Unfortunately, amongst some of our Asian students, if they noticed another child with a disability, they would particularly pick on them, and this girl had club feet, and it meant life there was very difficult, from her toothbrush being stolen all the time to her lead going to her computer, and anything that she did was sort of sabotaged by other girls of the same ethnic group as her. But still really, really, really unfortunate. But what started to happen is that the parents would start to give me very expensive gifts. And at first it started off as a thank you, But then it became that their expectations were for me to really do a lot for their daughter, and to really make sure that whenever I was on study hall, that their child was getting all of my attention. And so this was an ethical dilemma for me. So something that I decided to do as a nice thing for a student was actually being turned. And these particular parents were feeling that they kind of owned me, and that they had more of a right to my time. And so it was very important that I contacted them and actually said that it wasn't great for me to be accepting gifts, and that it was very important to me that I treat all students exactly the same, and that I thanked them. Yeah, I mean, again, ethically, this was really, really difficult for me, because I saw the child as missing out, and because I didn't feel it was right to bring her home with me anymore, just because of obviously expectations being placed on me that I could no longer follow through with. Okay, so Sherry Lynn and Jennifer. Well, Sherry Lynn, first of all, I hope I've answered your questions. In some ways there. I've used all boarding examples, and I think I've grown a bit since then in being able to have the tough conversations, but I would admit that I don't find them easy. And if I can find another way to say something without having to go and directly approach the person, that is what I'll do. And so I recognize that I need to improve in this particular area, especially as I take on more leadership roles. Thanks for watching, and chat to you soon. Bye.